Ladies and gentlemen, this is David Mirikitani with another episode of Weighing In, brought to you by USA Wrestling, the national governing body for wrestling in the United States, and by Nike Wrestling. Go to athleteps.com for all of your Nike and USA Wrestling branded gear. Joined today by Mark Ostrander, getting text from Grant Turner from Colorado Springs. I think he's going to try to jump on with us, Marco. Good morning, sir. We were talking fantasy football, and I guess it's actually that time of the year again, right? We're recording on August 10th. The NFL starts in about a month, right?
Yep.
So Mark and I are in a league. If I bring up last year, Mark gets immediately defensive and brings up the 3 previous years. So, we'll get into that later if we run out of things to talk about. But I don't think
sounds like a plan.
I don't think we're going to run out of things to talk about this week. So tons of stuff to talk about here, but I guess to begin with, let's talk about the U17s and how that finished up. So overall, United States had 13 medals in the 3 styles. Okay. 6 in men's freestyle, 6 in women's freestyle, 1 in Greco-Roman, which is Jordan Rainey. The U.S. earned 6 individual golds. Ladarian Lockett, Paul Kenny, Marcus Blaze on the men's side or boys' side. Morgan Turner, Piper Fowler on the freestyle side, and Jordan Rainey and Greco. So I've got a personal relationship with at least one of these young men. So I think I'm going to go second here. Thoughts on the U17 team?
We had talked a little bit last podcast about it. The Greco was over. So I thought we talked about what this does for the Greco team, fundraising, things like that, because we had a world champion at U17s and deservingly so. That's what we're looking for, guys to come in. The women do what the women do. They got second to Japan, and Japan's still on its own little island if you want to do tiers. I think we're getting closer to the island, but they're just really, really good. And they've got a system that works. And we're starting to build that system with the way women's wrestling's taken off here in the United States. U17s, I thought we wrestled well. There were a few kids that I was kind of disappointed in. And not so much their wrestling, David, but just, I don't know, this kid out of Wisconsin, Sinclair.
Yeah, he went 1-1, took 8. Yeah.
And he lost to a good kid from Iran. I mean, that has nothing to do with it. But it's something as a coach kind of sticks out. He spent probably a minute and a half throwing his hair back because his hair was too long and it's in his way. And, that kind of takes away from what you're trying to do out there. And in the world championship, in that type of situation, you kind of think that wouldn't be a thing, but it bothered me watching the match. So I'm sure it probably bothered him, and it probably bothered Askren, who was in the, coaching. But overall, I think our men's team did pretty much what you expected them to do. They competed really hard. We had more champs than any other country. Iran had 2. I think Russia had 1. Russia would have outplaced us, but it's kind of hard to tell if it was all Russia or Belarus was also under that same category. So I'm not sure there. So, but yeah, that's kind of my takeaways.
Well, so Sinclair took 8. Ben Davino, who's really good, was eliminated. Christian Castillo lost on the backside. Villasenor, also added a bronze medal. A couple things like for me. So first of all, I've watched Marcus Blaze wrestle a couple times at junior duels. And let's put it this way. He's not underrated in the sense that like he's ranked nationally. He's really good. If you follow high school wrestling at all, you know who he is. Okay. So I'm not trying to say like I discovered this guy because I don't live in the high school wrestling world 24/7 like some people. But what I'm telling you is he's not flashy. Okay. He's super fundamental, but he's also really good in functional positions. Like I was working with some guys on jiu-jitsu and they talked about, coach, these are the 5 positions that in jiu-jitsu you have to be good at. And like one of them is called turtle, which in wrestling doesn't even exist. So we were breaking this stuff down. He's really good in like that side-by-side, that kick whizzer, that really good on the edge. You have his leg, he has your leg, all those kind of things. And he's super stingy. Like, I don't want to put this on him in a bad way. I want to put this on him a good way. He reminds me a little bit of Kyle Dake, where he can go get one when he needs to. Super difficult to score on, and is so comfortable in his defense that he doesn't get over anxious to score. Okay. And you know, so him winning, I think, is maybe surprising to some people because, you know, he's not flashy like Ladarian, which we'll talk about in a second, but he's well-deserved to be a world champion. Paul Kenny, same thing. He's going to be an incoming freshman at CBA in New Jersey. And Ladarian Lockett from Stillwater, I think most people know I'm involved with the Hall of Fame Dual Meet Classic. I'm the tournament director. Have a good relationship with Ethan Kyle, the head coach there. Actually coached his older brother in junior college. Ladarian's dad is an old junior college guy, wrestled for Terry Packett in the Osho. His father, Jasper, and his dad's involved with the Cowboy Wrestling Club. Ladarian wrestled a couple years ago in Border Brawl, and you look back on who we brought in for that. We brought in Ladarian, Aiden Thomas, who took 3rd at Fargo, J.J. McComas, who took 2nd at Fargo, Angelo Ferrari, who has won Fargo in Super 32s and everything else, and Sam Smith, John's son, you know, who's state champ and everything else. So, I mean, 5 of those dudes came in and was substantial. But I remember when Ladarian, he wrestled in our meet. All those guys are in the meet. And I told a buddy of mine, I go, that's going to be the best guy. He's like, you're crazy. Like, he was a freshman. And I'm like, that dude can do things right now that are very difficult to teach. Where he is not perfect yet can be taught. And I think junior college coaches are probably better at seeing that than other levels sometimes, because you need to find those kind of guys, because like a lot of times, like, you get kids from programs that aren't traditionally good. Like Blair kids don't go to junior college, you know, SEM kids don't go to junior college. So he lost a match. My buddy texted me. He's like, so much for the Ladarian Lockett era. He came back and beat that kid at the Kansas City Stampede for 3rd. Then he goes and wins Ironman as the 18 seed and just took off. And it's like, I know Jasper. He's great coach, not living his second childhood through his son. You know, he's just coaching his son, but not putting crazy pressure on him. Ladarian wrestled in Hall of Fame duels last year. I also did commentary for him on the state finals where he beat Eric Guerrero's son in the final. He's going to be a problem for people. Like, he is got multiple time national champion written all over him. I think everybody's assuming he's going to go to Oklahoma State. I don't know where he'll end up. I mean, that would be my guess if I had to bet on it. But he also made himself a lot of NIL money this last week too, you know, because the cost of doing business just went up for him, you know, in a good way. So congratulations to all the U17 guys. The last thing tied to that tournament is William Harper, who was not somebody I'm super familiar with, but a longtime referee, 36 years. I talked to a couple referees about him, said he's one of the really good men in the sport. He retired after 36 years. So shout out to anybody that gives that much time to our sport, traveled all over the world. You know, referees are sort of the unsung heroes in our sport. Without them, we can't have wrestling. And most of the time they just get griped at. So, you know, the referee is kind of a thankless job. Like, you're only talking about them if they do a good job if you don't talk about them. So there's that. The U20 entries are out, and I think we talked about this on the air, but they actually moved the tournament like a month out from Poland to Amman, Jordan, so that the Russian athletes could get in. I talked to a coach at Fargo who's got a kid on the team. I think most people can probably figure out who that is based on my relationships, but everybody had to switch flights and everything else. So those are coming up shortly next week. The U17, the U20 Worlds, U23 Worlds are still out there. The Pan Am U15s are still out there. So USA Wrestling is still going strong on that side of it. We'll probably do more of a deep dive next week on that when GT comes on. So lots of good things to talk about there, but we've actually got some Greco guys with some history, which is good, like Aiden Atau and those kind of guys will be on the team. Joel Adams, who, both are world medalists at other age groups. So, and those articles are on themat.com if you want to look them up. I'm looking at the picture of them right now, but Zach Silvis, Max Black, Landon Drury, Joel Adams, Braden Stauffenberg, Derek Matthews, Michael Altimer, Wyatt Volker, who's an Iowa guy, Sawyer Bartlett, who's going to Iowa State, and Aiden Atau. So that's the roster for our Greco team at U20s. Let's talk about this fourth place trophy thing, Mark. There's some ridiculous notion out there that by not giving out fourth place trophies, and apparently they're only giving them out to like, quote, not going to give them out to like individual sports. So like track and field where they keep team score, swimming where they keep team score, wrestling where they keep team score. Somehow this is going to save the NCAA $3.8 million. And you and I had a fascinating conversation. I think at least I thought it was yesterday, but how much money bowl games generate for football and the contract amount of the NCAA basketball tournament. And we may or may not get into that today, depending on how we manage our time. But I'll just say this. Whoever is in charge of handing out the trophies at NCAAs, whether it's Anthony or whoever else, put me down for $100 to buy a fourth place trophy. Like, I honestly think everybody should chip in. They should buy trophies for the top 10 teams. Like if my team took 9th in nationals, I would go get a trophy made so that everybody knows we took 9th in nationals. I mean, you had a team that perennially placed in the junior college nationals. And I mean, I think trophies were the top 4 or 5 there as well. Is that right?
Top 3.
Top 3. I mean, one year I know we took 4th and got a trophy.
Okay. Normally it was, if I remember right, back when I was coaching, I thought it was top 3. So I'm not 100% sure, David.
Yeah. It's a ridiculous scenario. And the argument behind it that it's going to save that much money is like insane. So
I think my opinion, David, I think the NCAA, if they think that saving however many million dollars, not giving out a fourth place trophy, they've got more problems there than what most people would think, because somebody's skimming off the top. Because I don't care if you buy 150 fourth place trophies, and there's not 150 individual sports that they give out fourth place trophies to. And I don't even know how they come even close to that amount of money, because the trophies are nice, but they're $150, maybe $200 a trophy tops. I can't believe they're more than that. So where do you come up with 3-point shipping? I have no idea. So I think they got more problems than trying to delete a trophy at the national tournament. And it's tough to get 4th at D1s. You're an elite team if you can be in the top 4.
Yeah. So if a trophy costs $1,000, including shipping, just hear me out.
All right.
Trophy costs $1,000, including shipping. There'd have to be 3,800 of them to come out to 3.8 million.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, I think that's the point of what we're saying. Like it's a bogus number. It's false news, fake news, whatever you want to call it, but it's not real. Okay. And it's ridiculous. So I did find out something else. I talked to one of the best sports commissioners in the country, and this is a twofold thing. So this ties to the fact Well, let's work backwards. So there's talk at the NWCA convention about having a dual meet national championship. The conversation was 2 weeks after NCAAs. I've talked to people about this. We actually tried to put a version of this together during COVID very quickly and just couldn't get it done quick enough. But it would not be the sanctioned event by the NCAA. And maybe that sounds bad, but it could actually be really good because that means the NCAA is not haircutting it. Like the TV revenue, the gate would all be technically the property of the teams and whoever the tournament organizer is. Okay. So you could do a revenue share, which is the model we had put together. So, the downside is it's like, well, if it's not an official NCAA tournament, who's going to wrestle in it? The short answer to that is if there's enough money for everybody, everybody will wrestle in it. So it's also after the season probably makes more sense in the sense that it will not, nobody can get hurt doing that. Okay. But this year would be a problem because you got a bunch of guys on teams that are going to go to the Olympic trials, like 4 weeks after. The NCAA tournament is the weekend of March 23.
Yep.
And the Olympic trials are the weekend of April 20. So there's 4 weeks in between there. I don't think anyone's going to wrestle a match halfway between there.
Sure.
If they're trying to make an Olympic team. So I actually probably know more about this than most people because we've tried to put a version of this together a couple times. We tried to put a dual meet tournament together in the regular season. And I've seen various interviews with various coaches, and it's very funny to me because I've had private conversations with coaches, and the private conversations are very different than the public conversations. So the public conversations from certain coaches are, hey, it's bad that other people are taking other people's guys from NIL and stuff like that. Well, that same coach, when we offered to pay for their travel and hotel, said, no, we want NIL money. Like specifically, like we're not coming unless the money comes in form of NIL money. And so that leads me to believe that they want the money for NIL so they can use it. That makes a lot of sense, obviously, right?
Yep.
And so if you want the money for NIL to use it, then you saying you didn't use any NIL money to get transferred just means you lost out on the bid. It doesn't mean you're against it. So there's, I don't know if hypocrisy is too strong of a word, but there's definitely a mixed message out there that, that's like you try to get into the nightclub and you don't get in and then you say, I didn't want to go. Well, you did. You went in line and you tried and they turned you away. Yeah. Like you can't say you didn't go and you didn't try. So thoughts on that?
I love the idea of a national duels. I really do, because I think duels are fun to watch. I love the way you can switch your lineup around. You can have more than one guy at that weight if you want to use them. There's a strategy involved. I think it's really neat. But to do it 2 weeks after the NCAAs, not sure it's the best time to do it.
When's a better time?
That I don't know, David. I really, like I said, I don't complain about it because I don't have an answer for it. But
that's our rule, right? We don't complain.
When you got 18,000 fans traveling to go to the D1 national tournament, getting hotels, taking off work, and then 2 weeks later you're going to have national duels, you're not going to get 18,000 fans taking off another week of work to travel or a week, I
don't think they care. I think it's a TV deal, right? Like it all comes down to revenue, right? So like the way the NCAA tournament works, because we're going to get in all this, the way the NCAA tournament works is a city bids on it. And the NCAA says, we want X amount of millions of dollars. And then it's up to us. Let's say we bid it in Des Moines or we bid it in St. Louis. It's up to us to make more than that money. Mm-hmm. So it can be profitable but the NCAA takes on zero risk. Okay, so let's say the number's $20, which is obviously ridiculous. Let's say it's $1,000, which is ridiculous.
Okay. All right.
The NCAA takes $1,000, and then your job is to make over $1,000. Okay, well, clearly you're going to do that when you sell 10. I mean, you have to count it's a P&L, right? It's all the expenses, the venue, everything else, but it's in the millions of dollars. Okay, and people only think about gross revenue; they don't think about expenses. To me, and this goes to the one semester thing, okay? So now all these things are overlapping, right? So there's a big push for one semester as well, right? Which I think most people in general are for. We're on a USA Wrestling platform, so that becomes interesting because the US Open is normally the last weekend of April. And so here's the thing that there's a couple things that people are not thinking about. Number one, to go back to the national duels. I think you'd have to do it like they do in auto racing, like NASCAR. And I know very, very little about auto racing, okay? But what I will say is I'm pretty sure the Daytona 500 is one of the bigger races in NASCAR, and it's the season opener. It's the first race of the season. And I'm sure it's like it's like golf, where there's all these tournaments and they're going on all year long, but they pick a starting point and a stopping point, and then the winner gets like $10 million in golf. So based on the season, in NASCAR, Daytona's first. I could see, like, if you did the first week of January, the national duels. Yep. I mean, what a banger way to start the season, right?
Yep.
And a bunch of teams could make money, and it could be based on last year's individual term. There's a gazillion criteria. I heard somebody say, like, you do 8 pods of 4, and the top 8 seeds host, and there's 2 duels, which I guess, and then you go to one tournament with 8. Okay. I think one day you could just do the top 16 teams in one location for 2 days. You don't have to do wrestleback matches. Like, that's where you could clean it up, right? You could do 2 mats. Day 1 could just be the round of 16. Okay. On 2 mats. So that's 8 duels. So it's 4 rounds. Okay. Now you're into the quarters. Second day is 2 rounds. Okay. And then you have the semis. And then you can wrestle the thirds and the first if you want to wrestle for third. And if you're doing prize money, which you can't do prize money, but you can do NIL money. So you can call it prize money in a different form.
Sure.
Okay. Then you can do that. So I think that would be a bigger TV deal. The problem with January is if you do it in that first week, it's right around the college football semifinals and finals, which takes over. Like, guys like us that don't bet on college football, we still watch those games. You're also start getting into the wild card weekend of the NFL. You don't hit basketball and hockey are in the middle of the regular season, so that doesn't really matter. And baseball's in their off season. Okay. To complicate things further, if you go to a 1 semester season, there's a line of demarcation. I put this in our Google Doc. The NBA playoffs start April 15th and the NHL playoffs start April 17th. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to use cities that have NBA or NHL teams, you'd have to run at the April 8th weekend. Okay? That is literally 3 days after the NCAA final, because the NCAA final is always the first Monday of April, basketball tournament. Okay? The whole reason you're doing this, besides the academic part, is to get away from the NCAA basketball tournament and build your own hype. Okay, so I don't think that really accomplishes it. Okay, I mean, because the Big Tens, Big 12s, everything was 2 weeks earlier. That's in the middle of the Sweet 16 and Final Four weeks, so the national media is not going to pay attention to it. You need the conference tournaments to be the April 8th weekend. Okay, because then people can sort of move their attention. You're now you're obviously that first weekend, you're not competing. The only thing you're really competing with, you're competing with the end of the NBA season and the end of the NHL season with like play-in games and stuff like that. And your deal with baseball opening day or opening week or whatever month. But baseball's 162 games. I live in a baseball city. Nobody's like super hyped. Like people will go to the game, but they also realize it's literally less than 1% of the season.
Sure.
But if you do it then like the April 22 weekend, number one, that's either the weekend of or the weekend before the U.S. Open. Now, I'm not saying they shouldn't do it because of that, because the number of athletes that wrestle in the NCAA Nationals versus the number of those athletes that wrestle in the U.S. Open, it's pretty small, but it's our best athletes that are doing both. Okay? So, I mean, that's a problem. And then here's the bigger problem. There's a bunch of cities that are knocked out now. So St. Louis can't host it. Detroit couldn't host it. Philadelphia couldn't host it. Cleveland couldn't host it. There's a bunch of cities that cannot host it. My man, what's up, GT? Okay. Talking about if the NCAA moves to a second semester sport and when everything would start, and the fact that NBA and NHL start their playoffs April 15th and 17th respectively, and the basketball tournaments usually like around April 5th. So if you did the conference tournaments April 8th, now the nationals are during the playoffs. So then you're kind of caught up. I mean, very, very short person, but so now a bunch of cities that have hosted this can no longer host it. Like St. Louis has the Blues. Philadelphia has the Sixers and the Flyers. Detroit has the Pistons. You can go around. The cities that could host it are like a city like Kansas City, a city like Tulsa. Vegas can't host it anymore. Not in where the Golden Knights play. Okay? Phoenix can't host it where the Suns play or the Coyotes play. Okay, so people don't think about this. And why that matters, people go, listen, somebody will host it, right? Like Kansas City will host it, Tulsa will host it, Louisville will host it, somebody like that. Yeah, I get it. But when less people can bid on it, the price doesn't go up. It's a supply and demand curve, if anybody's ever taken basic macroeconomics. When there's less demand, price does not go up. If any, it stays flat or goes down, depending on other extenuating circumstances. And the NCAA wants to make money. If the NCAA is not going to make any money off of the dual meet tournament because it's not a sanctioned event, I don't know if the NCAA is going to be happy about this. Now, let me add one more complication, which is, number one, they're talking about bidding this to football stadiums like they did during COVID with Minnesota, Minneapolis. And then here's the crazy thing. And this is not a wrestling thing. That is a across the board NCAA decision. They are no longer bidding these national tournaments out in 4-year cycles. It is now a 2-year cycle. And the sports commissioner I talked to said this is a nightmare because it takes like 6 months to put a bid together. I'm like, can't you just hit resend and just send all your same stuff in every 24 months? He's like, no, everything builds up. So we are booked 24, 25, 26. This fall, they will bid on now 27, 28. They will not bid on 27, 28, 29, 30, which is how it's always been. And then 2 years after that, they will bid on 29 and 30. And then this same guy said he thinks it's very likely that Minnesota is going to get one of those 2 years because they got hosed in the COVID year. And then that would be in US Bank Stadium, which is the football stadium, which holds, GT might know better than me, but like 50 some odd thousand people. I mean, it's where the Vikings play. So clearly it holds a ton of people. And now you go back to the whole how good or bad the sightline is going to be, the difference in size between a football field and essentially a basketball court or like a hockey rink, because I mean, that's the difference in these stadiums. And the other thing is Wi-Fi. Like if people want to be able to watch stuff and see stuff, like if you've ever been in some of these stadiums, your Wi-Fi gets all jammed up. So Mark, since you were part of the whole conversation, thoughts on all of that? Any part of it you want to talk about?
Well, I think if we move to a 1 month or a 1 semester sport, which it looks like that's the direction that they want to go, I think the national duels toward the end of January would probably be a good time to have that. I think you need to have it before the division, the individual championships, my opinion. Plus, you can use your red shirts, though. Early on in the year, you get 5 events that they can compete in, and not use eligibility. And if it's not going to be sanctioned, then you could use those kids in that. Now, if the NCAA decides to sanction the duels, that's going to be a different scenario with red shirts, I'm sure. So
they're not going to sanction it. They're not going to sanction 2 events, 2 national titles.
Well, that's.
I mean,
yeah.
I mean, they're not going to do that. They don't do it for any other sport, and they frankly don't care about wrestling. So we're not going to get a second sanctioned national tournament.
So anyway, I still think toward the end of January would be a perfect time for that. And you're probably right. It's going to be at the end of April will be the end, CAA's nationals individual tournament, probably toward the end of April. So, and I have no problems with it. I know the locations are going to probably change a little bit. I'm looking forward to going up to Minneapolis and having it in the football stadium. Everybody wanted to see what it would be like, because you've got to try it to see if it works. And I think then you open a lot more venues if it does work, David, because there's nothing going on in the football stadiums in April. So no hockey, no basketball. You could have it in bigger venues and get more people there, because I know tickets are hard to find.
You could have
yeah.
They sell out an hour, and it's like a Taylor Swift concert, and then we'll get GT in here. But basically, it's a supply and demand curve. Most of these schools could sell out the event without it ever going to the public, right? Like you take and the top 10 teams get allocations. Like at some point I saw that formula.
Yeah.
And so, and it's also geographic based to a certain extent, but like Penn State gets X number of tickets. But what these schools are doing is using, okay, this is one more thing, and then GT jump in here. What they're doing, because like every year people call me to help them get tickets. Okay. What like an XYZ school will say, hey, we'll get you tickets, but you have to join our booster club. And it's like $100 a ticket fee or $200 a year, or sometimes it's $250 a ticket on top of the ticket price. So if you leverage this where there's 50,000 seats now, and now nobody's got to go through this, the schools are going to lose money. That's a thought that nobody really has. Grant, happy birthday, first of all. And I'm not like you. I actually say happy birthday. Mark mocks you that Mark made a big deal and then didn't even call me on my birthday, didn't text me, didn't nothing, didn't hit you up on your birthday either. So his birthday is definitely getting skipped. How'd you hit him? I saw you play golf on your birthday, right?
Oh yeah, I had a great time.
Nice. And your guys' tournament is this weekend, right? The Grandview tournament?
Yep. Grandview Wrestling Golf Outing this weekend. Our location, which is Toad Valley, little plug for them. They're a great host. They've been our hosts ever since we started the program. So long-running tradition working with that facility and their staff. So amazing group.
You got a ringer team put together?
I have people that play golf more than me on my team. Yes.
Yeah, here we go again. Oh boy.
We'll make a little side bet off the air, Mark. We'll make sure that we...
Hey,
all right.
Hey, Grant, tell David I wish you Merry or happy birthday.
Yeah, you did. You definitely did, Mark.
Oh, now, Mirikitani. There you go.
So this is where I am on the totem pole. My mom and dad get called on their birthdays, and I get skipped. So we know where we are. All right, so GT, there's a lot for you to jump in the middle of. We did talk about U17s. Do you want to talk about that for a minute? Just your takeaway, big picture. With we had, I think, 13 medals. Obviously, I think everybody pretty much knows who won golds at this point. But
yeah, I think so full circle. NCAA collegiate division going to a later, almost a second semester sport. There's a lot of complications when it comes to the tournament side and whatever, let's say we just bump it back a month, right? So whatever conference tournament is always going to be the first weekend in April. The third weekend in April is always going to be the NCAA tournament. The second week of the tournament is going to be the NCAA Division II, Division III tournament. The NAI tournament is the same weekend as the conference tournaments for everything else. And the JUCOs are always like the same either weekend or the weekend before.
Right.
Couple of different things to think about when it comes to one, venue. That was a great angle and topic of the NBA. Also, just once again, getting outside of March Madness, I think, is what everybody is hoping to execute. But also, once again, venues and whatever it is, like they are going to put the Chicago Bulls in their arena. They're not going to put the NCAA championships in their arena or luckily, maybe the Bulls are out of town for that.
You can't do it during the playoffs because they don't know who's going to be where on the playoffs. That's the whole point. If you do it after April 15th or 18th, they can't even you can't get around it.
I was getting to that because we also lost. We also could have lost our venue for Final X if the New Jersey Devils would have continued down the path for the NHL playoffs. So there is too much of a variable for a town or a collective, whatever the Better Business Bureau or the CBB or whatever it is, to risk putting 2 years worth of work into hosting an NCAA championship when all of a sudden their team becomes the Cinderella story of the NBA. So I don't necessarily believe that going to cities that don't have NHL or NBA affiliate programs is the right move for maybe NCAA wrestling. Going to, Tulsa was fine. Kansas City would be great, but you're also not to say that Kansas City and Tulsa are like mid-majors, but you're never going to get the large draw city that maybe that you would have wanted to for Madison Square Gardens, Crypto Arena in LA. You're never going to get, American Airlines Arena in Dallas. So if you wanted to really grow the sport and maybe viewership or, getting a major arena to do things, you're just going to lose out on that. So that's a great angle. And then I think also just the other angle for wrestling in general is that you are now going to eat up into your freestyle season. So the US Open is always in April. Then you're going to have to basically compact all of your Northeast regionals, Southeast regionals, the Western regional, Southern Plains. All of that stuff is going to happen in the month of May. Or, basically you're going to have a 6-week time period where you're going to jam pack your entire freestyle season into everything, because usually the first weekend or second weekend in June is Final X determining our senior world team. So we're going to have a scheduling problem along with, now once again, it's not crazy to make a good schedule. You could probably figure it out. There's just hurdles that are going to face everybody that is going to be making those decisions before whatever happens. I think for Mark's point, I would love to see us attempt an NCAA championships inside of a football stadium during the month of April. If it does work, then once again, there's nobody playing football, to Mark's point, in the month of April in those big cities like AT&T Stadium or SoFi or whatever it is, right? So that could be a definite possibility. And once again, if we can sell 50, 60,000 worth of tickets every year, I think that the only places that you can do that are in the Midwest. I don't think that you can go to Florida and sell 60,000 tickets for the NCAA championships. I could be completely and utterly wrong, and I will eat my crow and take my medicine for that. But I don't know if we're ready for that yet, and that's just my own personal opinion.
And the interesting thing about that is, so you said a couple things. First of all, you mentioned like a team going on a magical run. Think about like the Miami Heat this year that had to play a play-in game to even get into the real playoffs and then make a run all the way to the finals. And if you're looking at that team in like March, you're like or like in February, you're like for sure they could host the like the NCAAs, right? If it was in April, like they're probably not even going to make the playoffs, or they'll be out in the play-in game or certainly round one. And then they're all the way booked through. The New Jersey thing is a very real example of that. I don't think they got to sell 50, 60,000 tickets, right? Like I think Minnesota, I think if you go, okay, most arenas can sell 18 or 19 if you put all those seats on the floor, give seats to mom and dad so you can have those moments. But like if they can bump to 25 or 30, let's just say they can sell 30,000 tickets and the average price is, say, $350, now you're at 10 million, 10.5. Okay, so the bid is not 10.5. Okay. And then it also depends on how your sports commission is structured. Like in St. Louis, they're an eat what you kill sports commission. So they don't get any money off taxes. Okay. There's other sports commissions that get hotel tax, restaurant tax, tourism tax. So they can do projections and do data based on previous tournaments and go, here's how many people come in and eat for 3 days and 4 days. And here's how many people drink for 3 or 4 days.
Not yet. I don't think.
I'll bring it to you. I'm gonna be here all day.
Yep, I'll be here right away.
So there's people that do these projections and they can say, look, we're going to get X amount of $1 million off the taxes. So we can bid this because we're going to get this much back in taxes and then this much from the revenue, and so it's worth it. We can bid it. The football thing is, I think, I don't want to be the old get off my porch guy. Like we got to try it and see how it goes, and the sight lines might be terrible. And like I'm a St. Louis guy, so I immediately think, well, we got an empty dome sitting here, so we could bid on it in football, in a football stadium where we couldn't bid on it with the Enterprise Arena where the Blues play. So theoretically, it'd be easier. The other thing is it would no longer be a hassle getting tickets. Mark knows especially how many people hit me up when the Nationals are in St. Louis, and that's no longer a problem. Like, go to Ticketmaster, bro. They're like, they're easy to get. I do think the teams lose money on that because, again, now you no longer have to go through the clubs to do that. So it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out. So, GT, I held off as long as I could on this because I wanted to ask you, the Maroulis wrestle-off is this weekend, correct?
Yep.
Is it in Colorado Springs?
It is in the Air Force Academy, yeah.
Okay. And it's Moshe Pettis against her, 2 out of 3, and it's just like a separate one-match thing like a while back when they had like the Dake Deeringer kind of thing?
Yeah, very similar like to what we've already seen like in Fargo many, many years where it's, whatever it is, best 2 out of 3, same format as Final X.
Right. Just whatever the minimum rest is, whether it's 30 or 45 minutes, that sort of thing. So,
correct.
Okay. Couple loose ends here. Like, just so people are aware, we are hyper aware of conference realignment. We wanted to get to these other topics because I think conference realignment is like an entire podcast. And so we're probably going to talk about that next week. I mean, if you have not read up on it, look at who went to the Big Ten, look who went to the Big 12. The Pac-12 is now the Pac-4. In terms of wrestling teams, ASU comes to the Big 12, which is awesome for a guy like me that is a Big 12 guy and has a ton of friends at ASU. And the 4 teams that are still out there, 2 teams are on the bubble, which are Oregon State and Stanford that have wrestling. The rumor is Stanford goes to the ACC. The rumor is they go to the Big Ten because of academic alignment. The conferences names are all wrong now, right? Like the Big 12 is no longer 12. The Big 10 is now like 18. ACC's got teams all over the country. So the names are all complete misnomers right now. But it's important to understand that this is basically all about television money and everything else. The downside that I heard from somebody who's fairly dialed in said this could really, really cripple Cal State Bakersfield, and Cal Poly, to the point that they may not be able to have programs. And it's very interesting, and we'll probably talk about this a lot next week, but it's all based on how you judge the profitability of the program, right? Like if you just say, well, it's ticket sales is on the revenue side, and then on the expense side, GT, I don't know what you said.
Oh,
Go ahead.
I did. So just briefly, because once again, you guys have been going for a while.
Go ahead.
I talked to somebody in the Pac-12 about exactly that for Cal State Bakersfield. Is that like the people, depending upon what happens to that particular conference, the Arkansas, Little Rock, Cal State Bakersfield, Cal State Baptist would all get folded into potentially a Mountain West affiliate, so that the people that were currently in the Big 12 or whatever it is, the Big 18 now, those other people would like break off the Northern Colorado,
Air Force, Wyoming.
Yep, SDSU, NDSU, all they would have their own basically 12 or 16 team Western, the Air Force, like all those teams would all band together because currently they don't have voting rights within the Big 12 conference meetings because they're affiliate programs. So the only people that really get voting rights within the Big 12 are the people that are actual Big 12 schools, which is, I think there's 5 or 6 of them.
They're not, I don't even know if there's 5 or 6. There's Oklahoma, Oklahoma State, Iowa State. Who else is in there?
They have West Virginia.
Yeah.
I think it's like 4 or 5. Because like Missouri was, once again, Missouri is then, was an affiliate. It's now back because they were in the MAC. So once again, that's SEC, which
they're SEC and OU's going to be SEC, right?
So we haven't. There's just a lot of that kind of where it affects some of the Olympic sport things that have just never been discussed because a lot of, let's just be all fair. This is a football realignment. This is a TV deal.
Yeah.
For football. Now the problem that you're going to face with and why I interrupted was that like I think that the smaller tier schools, they'll just realign to another, they'll just create an affiliate and they'll be just fine. The problem is that the school is going to have to allow them to like join whatever a wrestling conference. I don't think it's going to cost them any more money in order to wrestle those schools or be a part of that conference. It's just, it gives ADs a slight door open to just say, hey, well, we don't have a conference, so
yeah,
just close the door on whatever it is, right? But if all that stuff's getting sorted out, there's a lot to that. But I don't fear for the programs other than, maybe some ADs that are worried about stuff that doesn't matter in cutting programs. But I don't think that'll happen due to the conversations that I've had with people within the Pac-12 and Big 12.
So that's super encouraging. And I was trying to think of who is in the Big 12 now that would have like voting rights, and Arizona State would, Oklahoma State would, Iowa State would, West Virginia would. And then if you look at a bunch of the other teams, like Mizzou's an SEC school, like Army, Wyoming, Cal Bap, a bunch of these other schools that North and South Dakota State, like you said, that are all in that tournament because I'm there most years, are not. So what's interesting about that is now the Big 12 might be so small they actually need 1 or 2 of those teams to come. They're going to need Mizzou and OU. They're going to need them to even have 6 teams.
Yeah, so that would be the problem is if there's more affiliates than actual conference people, or, once again, we're now in a process with conference realignment that influx of $70 million for the football team with TV rights to the Big 10 or Big 12. There could be potential for program generation, especially within the Big 10 because of the Big 10 network, and a lot of those programs that are joining the Big 10 have the ability to financially add more programs with making sure that all gender equality is there as well.
Right. So I just pulled
and it's not just wrestling related.
No, yeah, wrestling's like the fallout of this. So I just pulled up the team standings from last year, Big 12. So Mizzou, SEC, Oklahoma State, Big 12, Iowa State, Big 12, OU is SEC now. Then all these other teams are not Big 12 except for West Virginia, North Dakota State, South Dakota State, Northern Iowa, Air Force, Northern Colorado, Wyoming, Utah Valley, West Virginia, who we mentioned, and Cal Bap. And they'll add Arizona State, But if they do what you're saying, which makes sense in a lot of ways, the Big 12's got to have the two SEC schools, or they don't have a conference.
Which I think that they would keep them because the SEC doesn't have a conference either, and there's nowhere for them to go.
So then that conference becomes Mizzou, Oklahoma State, Iowa State, Oklahoma, West Virginia, and Arizona State. Man, what a 6-team conference that is. And then these other teams, there's 7 schools. There's, 5 of these teams would move. 4 of these teams would move over.
Well, I think you're going to have UNI too stay in the Big 12, David, for wrestling. They're not going to go out to the mountain, I would imagine. I don't think they would, because it's closer to do the Big 12.
Yeah, all TBD, right?
Yep.
So I think the one thing, like I listened to the Flow guys, and they did a good explanation. Spay was on top of it with the economics, and it's how much is the Big Ten contract worth? How much is the SEC contract worth? You guys remember this because we talked about this after we had him on. Matt Bowlesby, who's a really smart guy from Flow, came on with us. And one of the things he talked about was the fact that, like, the SEC sponsors less sports. So each team gets a bigger cut of the pie. Let's say that the SEC contract and the Big Ten contract is identical, and one conference is splitting it up over, like, say, 17 sports and one is 13 sports. Well, then each sport in the 13-team conference is getting more money, which then can create a competitive advantage. And so then if you want to be good in, say, girls softball, well, the easiest way to do that is to eliminate wrestling because the SEC doesn't have it. So these are just all things to be hyper aware of. I'm not sure any of us can do much about it, but it's certainly a real thing. Next week, we'll talk about U20s. GT, I think that starts next week. So we'll get on that. We'll talk about the Maroulis Moshe Pettis wrestle-off result. That'll finalize our women's world team. The gambling probe stuff has to come in fairly soon. Mark and I looked it up. I think September 1 is the football season opener for Iowa and Iowa State. So they got to make a decision in the next 21 days there. And we'll talk about the conference realignment stuff in a bigger deal. And then I don't know if anybody saw this, but Robert Kokesh from Nebraska posted that he's moving on. And I think the writing on the wall there is that James Green will end up not only being an athlete there, but like a paid coach. And Tervel got, I think, promoted or something like that. So the other thing, if you're seeing this, like all these schools, and then we can sign off, all these schools that are promoting their volunteer coaches to full-time coaches, that was a ruling from the NCAA that allowed them to do that. They just had to come up with the money. So anyway, for GT, who's making deals, for Mark, I'm David. We'll talk to y'all next week.